Hey, everybody. So every now and then I like to add in these raw, unfiltered Anna podcast sessions. This time I want to talk about content and simplifying content strategy at a startup. So just taking it back and thinking through high level, what is the goal of content? The goal of content is to create relationships. It's that ongoing conversation that leads to a purchase. So it's going to get really simple here. I'm going to try to talk through these concepts in a simple way, helping folks understand like why are we even creating content? What's the purpose of them? And then from there, you'll understand what kind of content you're going to need to create. Okay, so let's talk about a couple things, three things actually. So there's this idea of having an offer that gets people enticed to get into your funnel, so to speak, right? Like lead generation. And I know folks use this. There's something that you need to kind of test and play around with and see what actually is interesting for your target buyer. What information would they really value, and then you can entice them to get into your funnel. And then the other side of that is then content, which is that's the demand generation. That's like what you keep putting out there to keep them to keep that relationship going, because you want to keep providing value as it makes sense for your target buyer. And then the third part is, what channel are you going to use? So there are tons of different marketing channels out there. The fastest channels are maybe the ones where you pay for them, like paid advertising, but that doesn't always mean that you're going to get ROI on those. It might be fast. You can test, you can see if it actually works for you, versus like a long-term play, which is like this podcast, getting content out there, getting folks to come on as guests, spreading that on social media. That's probably a longer play with a marketing channel. But there might be benefits to doing both and testing both and seeing which one gets you higher ROI. So, but first, we talked about the three. So your offer, the content, ongoing, and then the channel you're going to use. First, you really need to know, what is it that your target buyer cares about, their challenges, their goals, and how you can help them. And also, where do they spend their time? So this is something that I constantly talk to my clients about, and something I truly believe in. It's the marketing foundation. This needs to be figured out before you put together your offering, your ongoing content, and what channel you're going to use. So content engine. Let's talk about the content engine for a second. So creating a content engine, and the way that you should think about content, it should cover the full sales funnel, not just top of the funnel, which some companies are more focused in, how do we engage people? How do we make them aware? That's marketing. That's where the content should be. But it really should be across the three different parts of the funnel. So engagement and awareness, content for that. And social media is really good for this. People are browsing on their phone and they're checking out some cool stuff. They're checking out some entertaining stuff, educational stuff. So becoming aware of your company is, social media is great for that. The second part of that content and of the funnel is education and nurturing. So a podcast could be good for this. This is where you continue to build that relationship. Email could be good for this. And then the last part of the funnel is conversion. And so at all three of these places, you need to think about, what is that content that is right and purposeful and provides value, and you're in the mindset of a target buyer, depending on what stage they're at and what relationship they are in with your company, with you. So now let's talk about, I'd like to talk about something that's more deeper into the weeds. So now you kind of get the understanding of like, why content, what are the parts of content strategy, how to think about it in terms of how it connects to your sales funnel. And so now, how do you build this? Like, what does a marketing ops person have to think about and do on a daily and weekly basis in order for this content engine to be built? So I've got 6 steps, which I've shared before, and I think this is the right play if you want to really get going with your content and you have a lean team. This is a great play to use. So number 1, create your pillar content. And so pillar content can be your webinar, your podcast. That's where you start. Something that's really juicy, that's really meaty. And so what I found is, instead of creating pillar content that starts from like a lot of writing, where you start with like a blank page and you want to write about some topic, like a blog post, starting from a place where you're having a conversation with someone is so much easier. And from there, you can create different, like chop it up and create shorter versions of that content. It's so much easier. Number 2, you would upload the episode to Anchor if it's podcast, put it on YouTube. And you would then create short video clips. Number 3, create short video clips from that episode. And then those short video clips, number 4, is you'd post them on social media 2 or 3 times a week. Number 5 is you could create a blog post. Now is a great time to go back to something that maybe, if there was like a social post that had high engagement, maybe there's like a podcast episode where there's a lot of great, juicy material for you to use, then you create that blog post. And it's just a much easier place to start versus I want to write something from scratch. And then number 6 is you send an email with links to social video clips to get more eyeballs on there, to get more engagement on there, and spread that content, that message out to more people. So that would be the 6-step marketing ops process to build the content engine on a daily, weekly basis. So I get questions around, okay, Anna, I understand this content engine. Like, I get it. We need to build this out. We need to start with our pillar content. We need to have an offering for lead generation. Then we create content to build the relationship. And we use these channels, and these are the ones that are working the best. Like, we get it. But how does this all tie in with like sales materials? You're at a B2B company. You've got these sales materials. And hopefully you're thinking about creating sales materials at each stage of the sales cycle, right? The awareness, engagement stage, nurture, educate, and then conversion. And maybe in the awareness engagement stage, you've got your like infographic or checklist or free report, free consultation, free trial. By the way, these could be offers too. This is something that's like enticing to get people to engage with you. You've got your webinar, your podcast. So these are all awareness engagement items that fall into that bucket. And the same thing goes for nurture, educate. There's a bunch of different things that fall into that, like one-pagers and video series or best practices and stuff that'll help nurture and educate and keep you top of mind. And then on the conversion front, there's like case studies and testimonial videos and price sheets and lots of things. So how do you tie the sales materials into the content strategy? So there's kind of, so the way that I recommend thinking about it is they're separate, but they're also part of your content machine. So when you do create something that you think will be a great material for the sales team, like a one-pager or a flip book or best practices or whatever it is, you can think about it in the same way that you think about your content that you're producing on a daily, weekly basis. So when you create that infographic, you're going to push it across the same channels that you're using. But then when you create your case study, for example, which is, bottom of the funnel, you'd be more successful if you're sharing that like one-to-one on LinkedIn with people or over email with the warmer leads. So It's just being very intentional about what is it that you're creating, what sales material. And so that will help inform how you're going to share it, like what channels you're going to use. All right, so we covered a lot there. Let's move on to how to measure, because I know that this is a topic that gets thrown around a lot and people are not sure, like, should we measure? Is everything measurable? How do I know that my content strategy is doing a good job? You don't want to just be like throwing things against the wall and not measuring anything. You want to make sure that you're putting in the time and the effort and it's actually working. So the idea here is then it really depends on what your objectives are. It always goes back to your goal, which hopefully you've thought through that before you work on your content and do anything with that. Just like you do with your marketing foundation, you understand who you're for, what your offering is, what challenges you help the target buyer solve, and this is part of the foundation too, is figure out like what is your objective, what's your main objective for the business, and then from there, what are your marketing goals. So for example, for engaging folks, let's say your goal is to grow sales qualified leads, and you're working on updating your website as part of your marketing efforts and working on a podcast, right, to get people engaged. For nurturing folks and keeping yourself top of mind, you're thinking through like, how do I give people value? How do we create this essence of like thought leadership? We have so much knowledge here within this company. How do we think about nurturing and sharing all that information? And so then you're working on like the podcast again, like emailing stuff out, using social media to share different clips, using direct mail or even online mail, like sending little gifts at the right moment at the right time, talking to people one-to-one on LinkedIn as it makes sense. All this stuff is part of that, of nurturing and converting. So your opportunities to close conversion percent, maybe you want to improve that. So how is your content strategy impacting those objectives? And that's really what I would look at, is then you're now working on this content and you've got your objectives. What's the answer? How is it going for you? You can also look at like for opportunities that are created, what's driving that, and having a few things listed down there, and then going full force on those few things that are working really well. And then for closed won, what's driving that? Is it the same stuff? Is it the same marketing plays? Is it the same content? Is it something else? And you can go deeper within certain content buckets. Like, for example, with the podcast, you can look at a few things. Social engagement, likes, comments, and shares. You can track that. Downloads of your podcast. So you're hopefully seeing that's increasing month over month. Website traffic. So if you have your podcast integrated into your website, you want to be watching that. And then also, this is also pretty important, like reaching out to folks, outreach attempts, tracking that, and then guests booked, tracking that. So it's easy for us to forget, like, how much work are you actually putting in order to justify the output? Are you having enough outreach attempts? Do people say yes more often than they say no? Should you be looking for like other folks to bring onto your podcast that are maybe thought leaders in the space and more well known? So by looking at these types of specific metrics, and I mentioned the podcast in particular, you can get a really good understanding of your content and how your content strategy is stacking up. So I hope that helped you guys. If there's any question, feel free to reach out. You know where to find me.